Hello.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to Frugal Radio.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you here. First and foremost, I'm like such a fan. Like I have
Oh,
been
thank
such a
you.
fan of Raucous Records, friggin' all of that. So it's really, really an honor to have you here. I'm trying not to be nervous.
I'm
How are you doing today?
good, man. It's a little warm in New York today, but it's beautiful. It's like 80 degrees, so it's kind of like almost perfect.
Oh yeah. That's crazy.
Mm,
It's like 65 in Atlanta today.
that's crazy.
I know. Like switched weather, you know. So
Exactly.
how have things been going? Are you still like quarantined up there? They're opening up a little bit up there, right?
I'm quarantined because I'm being extra diligent because I'm asthmatic.
hmm I did get a chance to protest a couple weeks ago. I did go out there and we had our masks on the whole time. Oh, it was
Right,
hard. It was
right.
hard, but we did it.
I went to a local one here in Queens, not too far from me, on Jamaica Avenue. Rode my bike to the protest and stood out there for a minute just to be feel involved. But this
Right.
is not new for me. I've attended so many over the years.
Yeah, because you're what they would consider an activist, right?
Um, to a certain extent, it's definitely with the music. I'm not versed in activism like some of my peers are. But I definitely use my voice and my platform for the cause, and I always have. So I guess you could consider me an activist.
Okay, well, I definitely consider you.
Yeah.
So you still live in Jamaica, Queens?
Yes.
Okay. What was it like growing up there when you were a little boy?
Um, it was amazing. It was, I gravitated to the like-minded kids like I did for the rest of my life, kids who were into sports and playing basketball and football in the neighborhood, kids who were into comic books and so on and so forth. And when you're growing up, you're not really, you know, abreast of where you're at. You're just having fun and being a kid for the most part.
Okay.
Moving on to, later years going to high school and everything, I was an artist and I went to art school, and that's where I really, branched out and merged culturally with how amazing New York could be with the different, cultures and races and colors and art and design was a beautiful experience for me.
That's awesome. And did you grow up with siblings?
Yeah, two brothers, one sister.
Okay. And then I saw on Twitter recently that your brother passed away recently. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, he was very dear to me. We were actually born on the same day, Halloween, but 12 years apart, which I always thought was weird growing up. And
hmm
looked at my mom and pop like, what were y'all doing? But if you do the math, I guess it's around Valentine's Day, somewhere in those months where I don't know how we were born on the same day. But we were very like-minded, and you know, he went on to become a police officer, which is what I was tweeting about, which is I always got both sides of the spectrum understood, uh, how difficult a job it was. And even, years ago, was talking to him before he passed and my friends and was saying how, especially in New York City, these different tasks should be delegated differently, in terms of, I'd be in Brooklyn and I'd see someone who clearly was having mental health issues, having an episode, and someone would call and the police would show up like, it was a fucking terror attack or something. And I would be like, clearly this man you're yelling at him and yelling doesn't help the situation. So we would have those type of conversations, me and my brother. Yeah.
hmm Okay. So how did organized confusion come about? Like, how did you and Prince Poe meet when you were, how old were you?
We met in high school.
Okay.
A friend of mine had just got two turntables and it was all the rage, and I wanted to test out, you know, my abilities. I was a beatbox at the time. I wasn't even writing rhymes. I would like play drums on the lunchroom table, and then started working out a little bit of rhymes here and there. But uh, we 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 went to my friend's house and started making tapes, and we were really, really, really horrible. I remember the first tape I got at home and listened to it, and I was like, "You suck! Like you're horrible at this." But I think it was a good thing to do, to be able to hear that, because I was able to listen to who I thought was good, see where I was at, and work at trying to get to that level. And I think it's important for the artists themselves to be able to hear where they need to grow at.
And then it wasn't always called Organized Confusion, right? It had another name beforehand, right?
It was simply too positive before Organized Confusion, STP for short. And Barbito Garcia had our demo. He took it to Russell Simmons. We had a meeting with Russell Simmons, and he was like, "This is the worst fucking name ever in hip hop." So I'm not signing a group name simply too positive. So we were like, "We gotta change the name. We gotta change the name."
I know I read the story about how Bobito helped you guys come up with that name too.
Hmm.
So that was interesting. For people that don't know, it was from a record, Confunction by Confunction, the group.
Yeah,
uh,
organized can function. Yeah.
Organized Confunction. Yeah, that's what it was
Hmm.
from.
Hmm.
Okay, so now when you and Prince Poe were together and you manifested your rap career and you were searching for producers, who are some of the early producers that helped produce Organized Confusion?
Well, we were self-produced, totally
Okay.
self-produced. Me and Prince Poe. We had a crew called the Organisms who also had equipment. Shout out the Butch and Brian, Kid Nice and Neat, who also stepped in on production. But prior to that, we were working with the legendary Paul C, who was working on our demos, and it was his untimely passing, which kind of threw us our first of many tragic curveballs. So we were stuck in a position where we had worked on these demos with Paul C, and we couldn't move forward from there. So we had
Mhm.
garnered a situation where we landed couple of record deals, but we then had to go on our own and produce the rest of the records. So which is
Right.
why, kind of a gift and a curse. It's kind of why that first album is super experimental, because we were literally putting things together on the fly in the studio. We weren't really like we went out and got equipment with our deal, but we weren't really like working on demos and perfecting them at that point. We were like coming up with songs and just going to the studio and recording them. And I think that's one of the things that helped us to sound as innovative and experimental as the first album did,
Hmm.
which
Yeah, I
was a
was
good
reading.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good thing. It was an awful,
Hmm.
awful, awful story. I read about the story too, and just how sad it was. Now, I really feel like that probably had something to do with why you guys had to take a different deal with a different label, because that's what you're saying is that Paul C had did the work and then everything basically fell through with all of that. And you guys lost a great friend and hip hop lost a great producer.
Producer, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
because he's pretty legendary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I could just talk for days about how ill he was and his record collection, and uh what the tutelage he passed on to different producers who, with the way he was truncating and the way he was doing drums and so on and so forth. And it was very, 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 very funky, the early stuff that he produced, which wasn't prevalent in hip hop at the time. It was like kind of bland.
Hmm.
I would say, of course, Marley Marl, and
Hmm.
a couple of other producers, but Paul was really, really funky with his beats.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that.
Mm,
And I was reading too that they had actually questioned Prince Poe about that because he had tried to go visit him the same night that that happened,
right.
and he didn't even have any involvement. So that was like another situation that I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, that I feel like you had to undergo that was really stressful with the police.
It was the detectives called my house because I was one of the people who left a message on the phone at the time, and that's kind of how we found out. We hadn't heard from him in
Hmm.
a couple of days, and then have the detective call a house, and just it was pretty traumatic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We were super young, and to have someone murdered, you think back to it, you kind of swallow that stuff like we're tough, we're from the hood, it is what it is, and you move forward. But when I dig deep and I examine those moments, it's not easy to swallow. I still have a tough time thinking about it because he was a good friend of ours as well. He was teaching us a lot, and then it's hard to fathom, you know, what path we would have took with him there. And when I think
Yeah.
about it, it still bothers me. You know.
Shoot, just reading it bothered me.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I feel you on that. So after that, you guys signed to Hollywood. Is that the
Right.
first people that you guys signed with? Okay, just making sure that that
Yeah.
information was correct.
We
Okay,
signed to
and then
Hollywood. Yeah.
so now Hollywood, that is under Disney, so that's like considered a major label, right?
Yeah. 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 Well,
Okay.
it was a subsidiary of Disney. The actual place we signed was called Hollywood Basic, which was a subsidiary to Hollywood Records, which is the famous rock label. And I remember going up there. We flew out to LA, and they were trying to sign Cypress at the time, so everybody knew Dave Funkenklein,
Hmm.
Naughty. They signed Money B's group, Raw Fusion. And they had a bunch of interesting projects at the time, and they were open minded to where we were creatively. So that's what was most important to us at the time. So that's why we signed with them.
Okay. So I guess my next question about labels is, do you feel like there's a difference between working with an indie label like Raucous as opposed to a major label?
I think especially in that time frame, I think that's what's important is like the context. We're
Okay.
talking about 93, 91, 93. So we're talking about a situation where there's A&Rs and people assigned to projects to make sure they go a certain way. And that's something that we didn't, even back then, we didn't want to get caught up in terms of really having someone be like, you should dress like this, and you should wear these clothes, and you should put this person on the song. So we had a lot of freedom in that sense. And I think
Hmm.
now, if you talk about the context and the paradigm of where music is now, it exists to a certain degree, but it doesn't really exist anymore. And I think in some cases, music has suffered for lack of having A&Rs, and I think in some cases, it's benefited from having the artists become business people and be the CEOs and entrepreneurs and A&Rs of their own records and projects.
Hmm. Very well said. I agree with you on a lot of that because as a DJ, I've been in the game for a minute, and we have to end up doing a lot of that work for
Hmm.
artists. That's why you'll see DJs starting to get a lot of plaques and stuff like that because we end up having to do a lot of that. But you're right, there's only so far that we can go with it because the labels don't pay us. We might get a plaque for it, but we really do that out of the kindness of our heart,
Right,
because
right,
we want
and
to see
and
people win.
and this is why you get the type of artist that you see now, like a good A&R would have your career in his interest. So he would
Hmm.
be kind of shaping you, not just in the moment, but in the long term as well, probably for the duration of his deal and the contract that you signed. And now
Mhm.
you don't see a lot of artists getting that tutelage and that training and that stage and just the the teaching that you would get back in the days, even if you go past, hip hop into the Motown era. You don't, a lot of these artists, I look at their stage presence or whatever, and they're rhyming over or singing over their vocals. They probably don't even remember a time when people actually performed their own
Performed
vocals.
on TV tracks. I know.
So, I've been to showcases and I've seen like people just get up there, take their shirt off, put the mic in their pocket, let their record play, and they just dance. And I'm like, this kid, he probably doesn't even, know that he's supposed to be saying his words into the microphone.
Right, exactly. Trust me, that's a lot of what we do for the coalition DJs is we help the artists kind of get all that together, you know.
Hmm.
We try anyways, but a lot of times these young people, they think they know it all and they don't want to listen until it's too late. That's another thing that can happen.
Yeah, and it's like in this era, it's kind of like once the moment passes you by, it's so flighty, these types of records. And then
Hmm.
even talking to people who work in the music industry now, it's like, an, an artist could be so hot one week and so not in 7 days, you know? And that's just crazy, where we come from, because we were digging in the crates to find samples during that era. We were naturally discovering artists who we were like, wow, this is amazing. How does this music still translate to my spirit 20 years later, 15 years later? We're listening to, whoever it was, James Brown,
Hmm.
whatever record you find that was like,
Hmm.
this shit is just amazing listening to it.
It
What
is.
did they do to have longevity in the music form so that this song still moves me now? It's not just a moment, and you studied it. And so your intent, a lot of the artist's intent during that time was to last. It wasn't just, I want to rap for the summer and see if I can get it popping, and then I want to do something else with the riches that I gain from getting popularity or what have you. I think a lot of artists coming out of that golden era, they had that, I want to be in the likeness of the people who I'm sampling or the people who move me. And that's where that comes from.
Hmm. I think it does too. Luckily, they've been bringing back what's really been the producers that have been really bringing back the sampling, but they're doing it with songs that were new when I was a kid, from the 90s,
Right.
R&B
And that's a
songs. So,
hmm and that's a popular thing now because like I think 15, 20 years is probably the benchmark of a golden era. When
mhm,
we were sampling, we were looking at probably 70 to 74.
mhm,
I would sample anything, but 70 to 74 was kind of an era in soul and funk music where the drums just sounded the way we wanted them to sound
yes,
in hip hop throughout all the genres, R&B, soul, rock,
mhm,
psych. The whole music scene was just incredible back then,
it was.
inspired by a movement, a cultural movement as well
Do
in
you
the
have a favorite
States.
Rare Groove song?
Um, my favorite artist from that era is an artist named Eugene McDaniels, because not only do I like the album, but I like his vocal and I like his lyrics. He inspires me a lot. The album Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse is one of the most politically conscious records to this date. In fact, one of the songs is banned. They have the album on iTunes, meaning on Apple Music or whatever, but one of the songs is not even on there. They took it off.
Right,
Yeah. Mhm.
right. Yeah, I saw, I'm trying to remember what song it was. Somebody sampled on one of our Zoom meetings with Coalition, somebody sampled Syl Johnson. I was like, it was like the
Mhm.
first time that I heard anybody sample something from the 70s. They
Mhm.
sampled Is It Because I'm Black? I was
Mhm.
just like, wow, it was blown back because I could really listen to that stuff all day. You know, that
Mhm.
old school reggae, especially like old school reggae. I love that. It's amazing to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I think that the main issue with a lot of producers, you know, I work for Zaytoven. He's a multi-platinum producer, and he doesn't
Mhm.
sample anything because he can play the keys. So he can pretty
Mhm.
much create his own music, and he's amazing.
Mhm.
But I think the main problem that we have as a label, and the main reason we don't like to sample things, is because of being sued or putting out this amazing record and it growing legs and not being able to clear it, you
Right.
know? So
Right.
we know
That's
you've had
why.
experience.
Yeah. When that's why
Mhm.
it's important to grow and do both. Like with the new project I'm working on. It's actually a band. It's not a Pharoahe Monch record. The project's called 13, stemming from one of my aliases.
That's your
And
favorite number, right?
yeah, and
Okay.
guitarist and a drummer. Guitarist is named Marcus Machado. Drummer's named Daru Jones. Both of them are really, really super killing it in the music scene and funk soul jazz scene. Marcus is just killing the game right now. Daru is killing the game. Used to play with Slum, Black Milk, Jack White,
Hmm.
and it's a totally like 70s hardcore rock vibe. Shit feels like Led Zeppelin meets Mobb Deep, kind of,
Oh, wow. I would like to hear
and
that.
it's super illmatic. And yeah, like most of the stuff on there is original music, and the stuff
Hmm.
that is close to maybe being an interpolation, we got to clear it because you know, the publishing companies and the publicists and all that are like, yo, this could be huge. And for that reason,
Hmm.
you don't want to put out something and it gets legs and you're not able to run with it.
Right, exactly. So backing up, I had one more question about the labels situations. Did you have more success working as an indie label over a major, or how did that inspire you to like start your own label?
Um, After I did the solo record with Raucus, um, got into some turmoil and tumultuous situations legally with the Simon Says record. And, it just kind of pissed me off. So I kind of took a break. But luckily, I was doing a lot of touring and a lot of writing. I was doing a lot of, good music things, but I just wasn't, you know, I was recording sparingly. When I came
Hmm.
back, you know, um, I was touring the Sony PlayStation tour with Talib and Mos, like 3 tour buses. So it was back when the industry was good, good bread.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I was writing for Puff, and I remember I was playing some music on the tour bus, and Talib's manager at the time, Corey Smith, was like, "This shit is amazing, and why are you holding on to this music?" And I was like, "Fuck the, fuck labels, fuck the music industry. I'm not signing a record deal anymore." And he was like, "You have to put it out. This is, some of this music is amazing." And it was what would later become the Desire album. But I was just so tainted by what was going on or what my history had been with record labels, and I was doing pretty well for myself, that I was like, I don't need to sign a record deal. I didn't want to go independent at the time, so when I came back, um, I was still finishing writing some records for Puff, and he was like, "Yo, play me what you're working on." And I played him some songs, down in Miami when I was writing for him, and he was blown away, and he was offering me a record deal. And then I came back and I played some music for Sony, and they were offering me a record deal. And I played some records for Universal, and they were offering me a record deal. So I went from being pissed off at record labels to having like a little bidding war going on, which my lawyer was like, this is insane right now. It's kind of unheard of. Even back then, labels were like moving away from traditional record deals.
Mhm.
And wind up signing that deal, which was a major deal still. And then after that was when me and my manager was like, we need to step on our own and try to do something independent because it's just the way that the industry is moving. Records are not selling, and there's a disconnect between hip hop labels and the audience. So we moved on to the War album, and the reason I tell this long story is
That's
we
fine.
partnered with Duck Down, moved on to the War album, and I still had the same Rolodex that I would have had if I was with a major. It was me reaching out to these people anyway. So I reached out to Immortal Technique, and I reached out to Jill Scott, and I reached out to the producers and got that record done, and it wound up performing better than the previous album. Not that I don't love my little album children. I love them
Mhm.
all the same.
Mhm.
But it was just a matter of being in sight on the same frequency as where your fans are. Because
Right.
I was noticing that not just me, so even some of my peers, I would be at a gym or in a mall, and somebody would walk up to me and be like, "Yo, when are people like you and Q-Tip and da 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 gonna put music out?" And I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
Q-Tip just dropped a new record,
We do all the
and
time.
right,
I know.
and I would be like, it's not their fault. They're just missing something. It's like if it started to get like if you're not following this person on a platform, then it was no way to find out because the magazines were fleeting, and if they're not playing a particular artist on the radio, how else would the casual fan even know that someone has music out? And
Right.
we were seeing that shift hard. It was shifting very hard, and I saw labels like grasping for straws in terms of like trying to figure out what was happening in the moment. And
Mm.
so because we took a step down to say let's do this ourselves, got on a soapbox and stood right there in the neighborhood saying, hey, it's Pharoahe Monch, I got an album, I got an album. More people wanted to support and gravitate to it, and it did really well.
Mhm. That's an amazing story. And people definitely want to hear stuff like that, more like do it yourself stories and things, because to be honest, a lot of people are not really feeling a lot of labels or signing to labels right now. Do you feel that their message was genuine when they came with all the Black Lives Matter stuff and dropping urban from their genre?
I didn't, man, I'm so out of the loop that I didn't even know they did that. Like, I'm not even following
What did
what
we
labels
see?
are doing.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was RCA that dropped
Mm,
that dropped but hey, that was one of the main labels that RZA called out in Labels.
mhm,
Remember that
mhm,
song? So,
mhm.
mm. So yeah, there's a lot of I don't know. They're gonna have to start doing things a little bit differently. I know that with my experience with labels, I felt like they wanted to do things their way, and the way that they wanted to do it their way, like finagled it in a certain type of way to where they could pocket money instead of
Right,
like use the person that we wanted to use for a better price. Does that make
right,
sense? That
right,
that was the vibe. There's no proof of that, but I could just see how they could be hustling and you know
right.
racking
I
up
mean,
money.
yeah, man. Fuck these labels.
You've seen it all. I know. Okay, right, exactly. You're right there with me. There's such a headache. I swear, it's crazy. So, now performing overseas, you've done a lot of overseas shows, right?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. So, what was it like when you were in South Africa and you performed for an all black audience for the first time?
I mean, enough said. You know, it's just insane. Because anywhere else you go in the world is the antithesis of that. and that's fine too. But for the first time, those shows were just mind blowing. I remember being in Sweden, and a girl from South Africa was at the show, and she came backstage, and she was like, "I'm appalled that you've never been to the motherland to perform," and I'm like, I just can't fly to, you know, Johannesburg and show up and be like, I'm here. Like somebody has to book me.
Right.
So finally, but she made me promise. And the reason why I bring that story up is she was like, you have no idea how the love you have there, and you have so many fans there. And I was just like, I do. This is, but mind you, the context, this is kind of post, not post, but pre uh Instagram, pre,
Mhm.
there's no way of me knowing. And
Mhm.
then with the introduction of Twitter and Instagram, I'm looking at the demographic and the stats of where my followers are coming in from, and I'm like, holy shit! Like I didn't know I had that much love there. There was no way for me to know unless somebody told me. So
Mhm.
boom, get on stage, crowd is crazy. We did some festivals, we did some club dates, and the shows were just insane. I'll never, 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 ever, ever, never, ever forget the love. It's a different energy, and you know, I'm just so honored and so blessed to have been able to perform there. Because you got to get booked there to perform there. So
Yeah,
all my
that's a big
artist
deal.
friends, you know, you just can't fucking show up in
I
Cape
know.
Town and be like, yo, let's book some shows. Shit. So
Yeah, that's what they think. They're always like, "When are you coming to Nigeria?" I'm like, "Do you know any booking agents out there that my label can
exactly,
contact?"
exactly.
I know, it's funny. So, how did you develop your rapping technique, and what is some advice that you can give to some of these young people out here on how they can become better rappers? Because they need it.
Um, the flyest thing about emceeing and lyricism is that there's no box. You want to focus on a artist that you like, that you want to be better than, and study them and understand why and how they became who they are and who their influences were. I always say, like, if you're a Jay-Z fan, you need to know that he was a fan of Big Daddy Kane, and he was a fan, and then study the lineage of the apex that you're trying to see yourself at, who you're trying to see yourself as. But within that framework, there's really no box to it. And I still
Mhm.
think lyricism is really limited and underrated in terms how people speak about it. It's just an amazing thing within itself that's very layered, and it's not black and white. So many different ways to approach it, from the content to just like music. It's just the same thing. So I wouldn't limit myself in reaching for my best self. I would be open to trying things that I've never even heard before, and spending time uh, being wrong, as well as spending time being right at what you do. It's all okay. You know what I'm saying? Nobody ever has to ever hear, you know, your experimentation, especially now the way we all record at home and in these small studios. There's no limit to what you can write about. There's no limit to rewriting things that have been written about already in your own perspective. So, lyricism still has a long way to go, as well as people like Busta Rhymes and Eminem and Jay and Nas and so on have pushed it. Still, the ceiling is still so high for it to grow, new artists to come along, and for us to be like, no one's ever did no shit like that before. But I think the industry puts a pressure on everybody to stay within a frame.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. Now, see, I'm in the South, so we have a lot of different rapping styles. And for me, coming up, especially like in the 90s and in like the 2000s, being really into like Mad Lib, Planet Asia, a lot of the people that you worked with and collabed with over the years, it was really hard for me to adjust to going to gigs and them expecting me to play snap music, crunk music, southern rap and stuff like that. But I definitely learned how to appreciate those rapping styles like the Young Jeezys and the Young Dolphs and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and the little babies. So that being said, I've never been the type of person to try to hate on the youth. I've always tried to like help them be better. So that was why I asked that question. And that's like the number one
Right,
thing that I think that I tell people, even if I don't like their music, I'm always like, go back and keep trying because it wasn't
right,
terrible. That's why I
right,
wanted you to talk about how terrible you thought you were when you listened back to your first stuff.
right. And
Yeah.
like I said, like, the whole gamut across the board, no matter what style, I've always tried to pull something from what I'm hearing, especially, you know, if I like the joint, I'm like, why do I like this joint? Why does this
Mhm.
guy doing this style that everyone's doing, how did he cut through? Why is this song so good?
Mhm.
And that's what you have to do as an artist because you can't cut through doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. You just become a part of it. And that ceiling is it doesn't last, so you want to have something special, even if it's even if you take somebody else's song and you do your version of it. What's special about the shit that they didn't do that you put on there? You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that's my advice.
Okay. So now a fun question: who is your favorite person that you ever collaborated with?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, you liked everybody.
I
I mean,
don't have a favorite.
no favorites. Okay. All right. Well, what about your top five dead or alive?
um that's a context question as well because
Right.
I go back to Tila Rock and Kumo D and shit like that. So I have to put it in that
Let's do it.
context. But my top five is Coogee Rap, Kane, Rakim, Chuck D, and LL Cool J.
That's a good top five. I like it.
Hmm.
People will argue on Facebook all day about who the top five are.
Hmm.
It's hilarious. Okay, so the best advice that you could give to an indie artist about signing labels and releasing music.
Think about the end game. You know what I'm saying? Think about the end game to what you're releasing. Think about the end game to where you see yourself a year, 2 years, then 5 years. When even you're approaching a song, how is this going to lead to the next thing? How is this contract offering you a path to your end game? And question up and think up. Like, don't think small. Think like I'm really going to be the most successful artist this year or in the history of hip hop, and I'm gonna be on the Grammys and I'm gonna get this award. And this album is gonna do this. Like, really, 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 really think up, because if you vibrate, I want to get this played at the local radio station. That's what the universe is probably gonna throw back at you.
Mm, really good advice. Speaking of Grammys, you recently got a Grammy.
A couple years ago for a song I worked on with a trumpeter, Keon Harold, and on this Miles Davis soundtrack that we did, and we was working on the song, and uh, we were in the studio with Don Cheadle because he plays Miles Davis in the movie,
Hmm.
and we were all in the studio like, this is some real Grammy shit right here, like, you know.
Hey, that's a listen, that right there, the fact that you said that it was a Grammy shit and then you guys
Mhm,
went and got a Grammy
mhm,
is proof that you literally manifest everything. And
mhm,
also, another thing that I always really liked about you too was that you were very experimental because you also did the project with Adam F, the drum and
mhm,
bass project, because I used to be really,
mhm,
really big into drum and bass. So I was a big fan of that too. And then now you have the new record out, The Same Shit, Different Toilet, featuring Styles P, or is it Pusha
mhm.
T? Styles P,
Styles
right? I'm
P.
right.
Mhm,
Okay, okay. Yeah, I really like Styles P too. That's one of my
me too.
favorite joints. Yeah, I play those two songs together. I play Good Times and Simon Says together
Mhm.
when I'm doing like a classic set. So
Dope,
yes,
dope, dope, dope.
he freaking killed it. So the obviously we know what the inspiration behind the record is, but just tell me more about the record, who produced it, the vibe in the studio.
Yeah. The record's produced by the great Marco Polo. Shout out to Marco Polo. I was working on stuff in general with him, and I heard that beat and I put it aside. And before I even started writing to it, I was hearing Styles on there because this isn't the first time we've worked together. We worked together
Right.
on the My Life record, on a record called Black Hand Side with Fonte is singing on the chorus. Um, and real comfortable working with him. He just brings something that's real earthy and hood to songs that speak to my spirit. And we recorded the record back in 2018, probably late 2018. And I just took it, put it in the stash, and was like, we need to work on some more stuff together and possibly put a project out together. And when the recent incidents happened and I was listening to our verses, I was like, this is spooky. And I know we aren't the only artists who make music about police brutality and civil rights and how we should matter. And then, it's timely again because of just how America is. But it was spooky how and strikingly scary how some of the lines on the songs is paired with the events that was happening. The first event was the Ahmaud Arbery situation, and I was like, we got to put this song out. We got to put this song out now. It feels, it's not yelling at people. It's not super aggressive. It's kind of smooth, but it speaks to what's going on. And the week we went to film something for it, and not film something for it, but like put visuals together for it, uh, the incident with George Floyd happened, and I was just like pulling my hair out, like, what the hell is going on in the country right now? And so, you know, I just felt like we should have a voice in this situation, and the song was timely, and I could do some interviews around it and what have you, and I could use my platform to try to bring some ease to people with my music.
Yeah, well, I really, really like the record. It's super hard. The video is fire. It's gonna definitely be in rotation at the radio station. And I just like really appreciate you for stopping by. And we're gonna get into this new record, Same Shit, Different Toilet, Pharoahe Monch featuring Styles P. Let's go.
Peace, God, I can't call it. Same shit, different toilet. When will the struggle end? Square one, we're back again. I'm about to lose control. What up? Please ease my soul, or I'm gonna kick me again. They're burning crucifixes on my lawn again. They wanna hang a nigga like an ornament. It's tormenting. Morning over yesterday, still yawning inside of a tournament. I can't win. Good morning, shotgun blast passed by my head. I'm a man, I tell you. I'm a man, I say. Pushed my daughter and my wife in the closet and slid my son up under the bed. Filled the Smith and Wesson with lead. Looked in the mirror, said, breathe. Now come on, breathe. I'm about to bring 6 Klansmen to their knees. A cold storm that my old man told me. If you're wondering why I have so much pent up hostility inside of my soul and the memory still molds me, just take a glimpse into the mind of an OG. Underneath the oak tree in the shade where I hang at. That's the same spot my great grand used to hang at. Peace, God, I can't call it. Same shit, different, all that. When we're on the struggle. Square one, we're back again. I'm about to lose control. Please ease my soul. I'm gonna get me a gun. What up, P?
Same shit, different toilet. Can't call it long line of alcoholics in the fam. My man gave me work, and I sat up on the strip and got knocked. A long line of homies in the can. Jail is the ship that don't sail, that hold the slaves. And the judge have you asking for bail like it's the wave. Like that's the wave. Meaning a slave even pays to be caged in, which is motherfucking insane. That's insane. It's like we picking cotton again. 45's a Klansman, shit is rotten again. They gave us AIDS, gave us crack, now they plotting again. That boy ran, so they shot him, then they shot him again. That's sad. The same shit, make the tissue new. Make it 400 years, let's make the issues new. Why you love a dead black visual? I'm about to grab my gun, shit is critical. The devils is evil and all miserable.
Peace, God, I can't call it. Same shit, different, all that. When we're on the struggle. Square one, we're back again. I'm about to lose control. What up? Please ease my soul.